Day 10 of the Delphi murders trial, and for the first time, the jury hears the voice of Richard Allen. He's charged with the murders of Abby Williams and Libby German. Today, the jury saw him deny the murders again and again and again during taped interviews and interrogations with police. But they also heard the first of many alleged confessions that Richard Allen made in prison. Thanks for inviting us in. This is your Delphi Debrief here on WTHR+. Let's get you right to Delphi, where our senior investigative reporter Bob Siegel and reporter Emily Longnecker are there. So Bob and Emily, what did you make of seeing these videos in court today?
Scott, today was, in some ways it was overwhelming. I mean, it was just jam-packed today, starting with videos and then just witness after witness, the most witnesses we've seen of any day so far. And as you mentioned, we got to hear from Richard Allen. That's really the focus of today. And Emily, we didn't hear Richard Allen in court. He didn't speak at all.
Nothing.
But we got to see him on video, speaking on video. We got to see one of the notes that he wrote. We got to hear what other people heard him say. This was really focused on helping the jury hear specifically from Richard Allen.
Absolutely. In that first video, October 13th, then in that second interview from October 26th, in that second interview, we get to see Kathy Allen come in and interact with her husband. And of course, she was in the courtroom today, watching herself on video, watching them interact, and we'll talk about that in a bit and some of the exchanges between them.
Let's set the scene for you right now. We are just across the street from the Carroll County Courthouse. It is directly behind us here. We can see it lit up. We're actually inside tonight because it's crazy windy here in Delphi at 5 o'clock and 6 o'clock. I tried to hold my notes outside. They were flying all over the place, so we decided we're going to move inside. So we have all of our notes in front of us, and 30 pages of notes today. I filled up an entire notebook in just 2 days, just with all of the witnesses.
So let's get you
quotes. Yeah, let's get you caught up on today's witnesses first. Here's today's testimony. We started with those 2 interrogation videos of Richard Allen back in October of 2022, just right before he was arrested by investigators. We heard from John Gallipo. He's the former warden at the Westville Correctional Facility. He testified before the jury today. And then we heard from just a whole bunch of correctional officers, 7 Westville correctional officers. We heard from Ethan Drang, Michael Clemens, Michael Roberts, James Early, John Miller, Brandon Fisher, and Raymond Smith, all of them correctional officers who got to hear statements made by Richard Allen while he was at the Westville Correctional Facility. And we also heard from one additional correctional officer, that's Jason Bedwell, and he is a correctional officer at Wabash, where Richard Allen was moved to between the time he was in Westville and between the time that he was moved here but before he was moved to local jails, which is what his defense team was wanting all along. So let's start off by talking about those videos which took up the entire morning of testimony. The day started off with 2 long videos showing Richard Allen being interrogated by state police. The jury got to see how Allen responded when he was questioned by investigators in October of 2022. This was 5 years after he voluntarily contacted police right after the murders to tell them that he was on the trails and on the Monon High Bridge on the day that the murders happened. I thought from looking at the videos that Allen was very respectful and calm in that first video. He offered information willingly. He appeared relaxed and animated while he was talking to both the Carroll County Sheriff and to one of the main investigators from the prosecutor's office, Steve Mullin. But once police told him that they wanted to search his phone and his car and his house, Allen, he remained polite, but he said at that point he needed to discuss that with his wife. And he told police, he said, "Your attitude toward me has definitely changed. This feels like you're interrogating me. You've known from the beginning I was out there. I told you that." And then Steve Mullin responded, "We're not mad at you. We're not upset with you. We're just trying to get the truth." And they asked Allen if he was the man referred to as Bridge Guy captured on Libby German's phone. They showed him the picture. And he responded, "It's not me. You're not going to convince me it's me. I had nothing to do with those murders." And he then said, "We're done. Arrest me or take me home." And there was an interesting part in that interview where he also said, "I don't want to be somebody's fall guy. Please don't think I'm questioning your integrity. From this conversation, it's like you think I did it." And it was really interesting, Emily, to see how things evolved over the course of that interview, from him thinking that police just wanted him to come and meet with them and talk about what he saw that day, bringing him back in years later because, as we now know, investigators had just rediscovered the file that showed that he was out on the scene that day. They desperately wanted to find who was the man that we've heard some people say was out on the trails on the afternoon of the murders. So Richard Allen thought he was just going there to fill police in on what he knew that day. And then he started very clearly to get the idea, wait a second here, they think I might have something to do with all this.
And we know a couple hours later, here they are at his house with a search warrant.
Yes.
Searching through his home.
Yes, absolutely. So they did take Richard Allen home after he said either arrest me or take me home. They did take him home. Then they served those warrants. They were able to search his car. They were able to collect the cell phones. They were able to recover knives and the guns. And we know that what happened next was that they tested the gun that they found inside his home. They got back results from the state police lab, and the test results show that a cartridge found at the crime scene right by Libby German's foot was cycled through a gun that Richard Allen had that they confiscated from his home. And so then they called him back in
2 weeks later.
2 weeks later, and then the jury got to see that second interview. This time it wasn't with the local sheriff, it was with state police investigator Jerry Holman. And that was fascinating to watch.
It was, you know, Jerry Holman comes in, and again, we talked about this yesterday, he tries to build a little rapport with Richard Allen. They talk about their mutual military service. He asks about, you know, has he ever been to a firing range? Has anyone ever borrowed any of his guns and knives? And then he kind of tells him, hey, we've got these test results. I've got this official certificate right here that says that this cartridge matches your gun. And that is when we see, you know, Richard Allen start to deny over and over again, saying, "What, you're not going to get me to confess to something I didn't do." And at one point, Holman says, "We're trying to help you," and he says, "No, you're trying to accuse me of murdering 2 little girls," right? And so, and at different times during this interview, Holman leaves and he comes back. And what I found kind of interesting is, you know, here he is presenting him with this evidence, saying, "We think you did it," but then he would come back in and say, "Hey, do you need a smoke break? Do you want something to drink?" As if just 5 minutes earlier they weren't talking about this really terribly serious matter, right? So, and
he kept portraying, I'm here to help you. I want to help you. I don't think you're a bad guy. He would say over and over again. It was really, but it was clear, and Richard Allen was able to clearly detect this. He was trying to pull out a confession from him right there.
Right, and you got to see, and we know Jerry Holman has testified that when he would leave the room, he would still observe Richard Allen, what he was doing. And I was watching the video of Richard Allen, his body language in there. I would say he remained pretty much relaxed, kind of, he had his leg crossed. I saw him look at his fingernails a couple times. He went like this, he stretched his neck, he looked up, he sighed a couple times. He did shake his head a lot. He did a lot of this in between Holman coming in and out. But it stayed pretty calm for a while. It did stay
calm, and I thought that in that video, I was trying to, first of all, put myself in the jury box to be like, okay, if I'm the jury, what am I making of this? And I was also trying to put myself in the seat that Richard Allen was in. How would I react if I was being interrogated, and if I had committed the crime, or if I hadn't committed the crime, how would I react? And from looking at his demeanor, again, I thought under the circumstances he remained calm.
Very.
He certainly never changed his story through the entire interrogation.
Not at all.
Despite being hounded over and over again. And you've got some of the quotes from that
Yeah,
interrogation.
I mean,
to talk about.
and there was some really interesting quotes. Jerry Holman, this is quote 1, says, "The media is going to portray you as a monster. There's only one way to get out of this, and that's to tell the truth. What happened that day? Are you the mastermind?" And Richard Allen says, "Anyone who knows me knows I could never do anything like that. I did not murder 2 little girls. You're trying to convince me to confess to something I didn't do." And Holman, tries to kind of convince Allen that he's on his side. Let's just talk about this. Let's tell the truth. Let's get out in front of this. He says, "This is your opportunity." And Richard Allen says, "Will you please stop giving me opportunities?"
He was tired at that point.
He
was
was
like, "Stop
I'm done.
trying to tell me over and over again that I did
Right,
this."
I didn't kill 2 little girls. Will you please stop giving me opportunities? I didn't kill 2 little girls. Holman, what did you do? And Richard Allen says, "I went for a walk on the trail and I went home." And later, Holman sends in Richard Allen's wife, Kathy Allen. We know that she has been, somewhere talking separately, I guess, waiting in the lobby at one point. But it's our understanding, I think, and Holman testified to this, that they were talking to her a little bit. And
I thought that was actually like some of the most touching parts and some of the most emotional parts of the video, because again, Richard Allen is in this interrogation room and he's just learned that police are saying, "We have traced evidence at the crime scene to a gun that you own," and he's being told that. And then Jerry Holman is telling him, "Hey, we've told your wife that." And so he knows that she's gotten the same information. And then this is the point where they both come together and kind of reconcile the fact that they both now know this information that's been presented to both of them by state police.
Yeah, and she comes in and he stands up from the chair and they hug, and he's kind of comforting her and he's saying, "It's all right, it's gonna be okay." And he says to her, "They're trying to tell me that you actually believe that I did it, and I don't believe that. I don't think that you think that I did this. You know me better than this." And she's crying, and sometimes it was hard to understand her. And I was watching Kathy Allen in the courtroom watch herself on this video, and at times, she was dabbing her eyes and crying. She's looking at herself from 2 years ago in this moment of great stress, and can you imagine, right? She's hearing this from investigators. They found this cartridge of her husband's in the woods, and she asks him, "How did a bullet from your gun get out there?" And he keeps saying, "I don't know. I don't know."
He didn't have an answer for that.
He had no answer for her. And then Jerry Holman comes back in and kind of joins them, and he asks. He says. And Kathy Allen is sitting right there, and Jerry Holman says, "Now you're going to drag your wife and your daughter through this because you're too effing bullheaded to get out ahead of this." And this is the point where Richard Allen says, "Look, can my wife leave? Let's let Kathy leave."
Yes.
And then ask Holman, "Is it okay if I kiss her? Can I kiss her goodbye? Can I give her a hug goodbye?" And Jerry Holman says, "Sure." So he hugs her, kind of comforts her, and she leaves. And Richard Allen says to Jerry Holman, "You're going to pay for what you did to my wife. Did you see my effing wife?" And Holman, this is when it really heats up, right? I mean, they're swearing. So then Holman responds, "Did you see those 2 effing girls you dragged down an effing hill and you effing killed them? You're effing guilty, and I'm going to prove it. This is effing on you, Rick." And then the video stops, and then Judge Gall, read to the jury what we don't see then on the video, but that is, Jerry Holman leaves the room, he consults, we know, some other investigators, and he comes back in, and they put Richard Allen in handcuffs.
Yeah, he was in handcuffs, and it's interesting to point out that there was a conference even before testimony started today, before the jury saw those videos, where the state and the defense, they had a sidebar conference with the judge to decide what the jury was going to be able to see, what they were not going to be able to see. They did not want the jury to see Richard Allen being led away in handcuffs, so they decided that they were going to stop the video. And they told the jury, this is a redacted video, and we're going to stop it at certain points. Yeah, I suppose from a defense standpoint,
Yeah.
you never want them seeing your client being led away in handcuffs,
Right.
so that part was just explained to the jury rather than them seeing that.
I mean, and they didn't want the jury to see this video at all. You remember in April they filed that motion to suppress this October 26th video, but obviously that didn't happen because here we saw
Right.
most of it today. So
Right. So again, Scott, I think very important for the jury to be able to see that interaction between Richard Allen and law enforcement, whether he seemed reasonable, whether he seemed nervous, whether he seemed agitated, whether, he changed his story. And certainly he never changed his story. During the entire time, over and over and over and over again, he said, I am not going to admit to something I didn't do, regardless of how much you're trying to get me to do that.
Yeah, I wonder how Richard Allen, as he's sitting there watching this interrogation video played for the entire courtroom, including the jury, how is Richard Allen responding to all that?
I mean, he was watching. I saw him a couple times consult with his attorney, whisper something to Andrew Baldwin. I was just watching it from the point of view of, like, here's this man who looks very different than the guy in that video, right? Yeah. He's looking at himself 2 years earlier, a lot more weight on him. In that video, he's got a full beard. Long beard. He's dressed in all black. And today, here we're looking at Richard Allen, significantly less weight on him, dressed in khakis, green-colored shirt, I think it was, today. So I was just thinking about what it would be like to sit there and watch myself from 2 years ago in this situation. Like you say, you're putting yourself in his spot, you're putting yourself in their spot.
Right.
You're thinking about all the angles.
And during this whole time, we should point out that we were in our spot, sitting in the gallery in the courtroom, and furiously writing notes to try to get these quotes and to really try and capture what was being shown to the jury. So, Scott, it was interesting to watch the jury. I didn't get a chance to see the jury very much because I was writing notes furiously to try and write down what was said. But Kathy Allen was also sitting right in front of me.
Right.
I could see Richard Allen out of the corner of my eye, and they were watching the videos very closely.
Right, they were.
Let's go ahead and pivot now to the afternoon testimony, and that was all about the confessions that, and we were talking about earlier, do we call them confessions? Do we call them alleged
confessions?
Confessions. We heard testimony today from lots of folks who said they heard Richard Allen confess while he was in prison. And so we're going to refer to them as confessions, and it's up to the jury to decide how much weight they're going to put on these statements and whether what the folks who testified today said was credible or not.
Yeah, and in some instances they were testifying about hearing him talking to himself, and then other times when these corrections officers were these suicide companions sitting outside his door, and they're actually talking back and forth with Richard Allen, and they're engaging in conversation. And these suicide companions, they're called, we heard about this program, they're sitting outside documenting everything and writing it down in real time as he's saying this.
Right. All right, let's jump into that. We'll fill you in on the testimony from this afternoon. The first witness that we heard from this afternoon, former warden at the Westville Correctional Facility, John Gallipo, told the jury Richard Allen spoke to him several times while Allen was in a suicide watch cell there at the maximum security prison, one of the most secure facilities anywhere in the state of Indiana. He said one of the times that Allen spoke to him, Allen verbally confessed to the murders. He told Gallipo that he disposed of a box cutter in a dumpster that
at CVS.
Which is actually, we can kind of see it just down the street here from where we're sitting.
Where he worked.
Where he worked at the time. And another time, he said that Allen wrote him a note, and that note said, "I am ready to officially confess to killing Abby and Libby." And the note also said that he was looking forward to the opportunity to apologize to the victims' families. That note was shown to the jury in court. Then jurors heard from prison guards assigned to suicide watch outside Allen's cell. They told the jury they heard Allen make several more confessions. Corrections officer Michael Clemens, he told the jury what he overheard Allen saying. He logged in his notes, "The offender says, 'God, I'm so glad no one gave up on me after I killed Abby and Libby.'" And he also said, "I, Richard Matthew Allen, killed Abby and Libby by myself. No one helped me." Another corrections officer, Michael Roberts, told the jury he heard Allen say, "I want to confess. I know a lot more." And he said, "Why are you doing this? Do you know God? Do you know why I'm here? I killed Abby and Libby." Those were the initial testimony that we heard today about the confessions. And it was interesting during that time to, again, watch the jury taking very close notes about what was being said, and to see at one point Richard Allen I saw sitting there, and he was just kind of shaking his head no.
We also heard about the conditions that he was living in. That was what came up on
cross-examination.
And the defense was trying to point out that he was living in terrible conditions in a situation where he wasn't even hadn't been adjudicated yet. He was not, he had been charged, but here he is in a prison with other people who have gone through the trial process and been found guilty, and this was not his reality. And yet here he is in solitary confinement on suicide watch. Safekeeping, I think, was the word that safekeeping order that John Gallipo referred to. But for the most part, was by himself in a 12 by 8 cell, metal door, little window for the food. And this is when, the defense got into some of those details, some of the behaviors that he engaged in while he was in that prison. And the guards testified about Richard Allen drinking out of his toilet, Richard Allen smearing feces on himself, Richard Allen eating his own feces. And the defense was, asking them, do you think this is normal? And did you know that Richard Allen had a diagnosed mental illness when he came into the facility? We know that he has indicated that he has anxiety and depression. And the guards talked about not knowing that he had any kind of diagnosed mental illness. And many of them also testified that they believed that he was faking it, that he was acting out to get attention. One guard testified that you wouldn't see Richard Allen would be very nice and very calm and very polite. They all said that many of them said that he was very polite in his demeanor. One officer, corrections officer, described him as looking like a deer in headlights when he first came in. But that that his behavior would switch so quickly that led them to believe that he was faking some of this behavior. And the defense really attacked that and basically said, don't you think it's possible to be in those kind of conditions and just lose it? And lose it.
And I think one of the interesting things during cross-examination on pretty much all of these witnesses that Brad Rosie of the defense counsel, he kept asking over and over again. He said to these correction officers, even said to the warden, he said, "So tell me, how much training do you have in mental health behaviors?" And several of them would say, "Well, we get a little bit of training, but most of them, acknowledge that we would not be able to really diagnose if someone truly had mental illness." So it's one of the themes we're going to hear over and over again here over the next couple of weeks, especially once the defense starts to put on their side of this case, is hearing them talk about the fact that the conditions that Richard Allen was in, specifically at the Westville Correctional Facility, we heard the warden today say he was in he had better conditions in Westville than other inmates in the cell block. Here's what you got to keep in mind. That is a maximum security facility for what's described as the worst of the worst offenders in the state of Indiana. And what the defense is trying to point out is, he might have gotten a few extra visits with his family that maybe some other inmates didn't get. However, most inmates in pretrial detention are not sent off to the state's toughest maximum security facility. They're usually put in a local jail where they get much better, much different conditions than what Richard Allen had to endure during 13 months that he was essentially in solitary confinement. During this time, he's not in with the general population. He's in this whole separate wing with, as you say, the worst of the worst. And because he's on suicide watch, there's, I think, one cell for someone who could, and each block has one cell, and it has a
camera. So he is being monitored
24/7.
24/7. That they pointed out that he had no privacy, not when he went to the bathroom, not when he talked. The only, I guess, bit of privacy he had was when he would be taken out to talk to his psychologist, Dr. Walla.
To meet in a
Very confined,
call
a cage, right?
Yes.
They called it a cage. And I mean, after you left, we heard from a few more prison guards who talked about some of his behavior, some of the things that he said to them. Officer Brandon Miller testified that Richard Allen told him he killed 2 girls from Delphi with a box cutter, that he stole it from CVS and left it in a CVS trash can. And Officer Miller also testified that Richard Allen told him he wanted to rape the girls, but he got scared, panicked, and instead killed them. So we heard that from Officer Brandon Miller. We also heard some really graphic details from Officer Brandon Smith. In the middle of the night, Officer Smith testified that Richard Allen just kind of started talking to himself and said, "Kathy, I did it. I'm guilty. Run, Kathy, run. I did it. I killed those 2 little girls, so I have to kill myself now." And this same officer testified just an hour later, Richard Allen stands up and he starts singing "God Bless America." And then he testified that he walks over to the door and he's actually masturbating and singing "Mama, don't let your babies grow up to be cowboys." And he's licking the window of the door. Then he's singing "God Bless America" again and running in place. And when Officer Smith is talking about this, I mean, there were several moments that were really uncomfortable. This obviously was one of them for a lot of folks. And obviously when they, you know, Brad Rosie was on cross questioning some of these guards about him drinking toilet water and eating his own feces, you could see people kind of shifting. And the jury actually had, you know, questions about that. Well, if somebody is doing that to themselves and smearing themselves with that, how long does it take you before you call someone, before you call a mental health professional
Yes.
to assist and step in?
So the things that you're describing, the things that the jury heard about today, those are things that we would have to think that jurors would be weighing. You know, is this a person who is in his right mind at the time that these confessions would be made, or is this someone who is so mentally incapacitated that their behavior is irrational and you might not be able to trust or believe what that person is saying? So again, that is the direction the defense is moving to. We're going to hear a lot more about that on cross-examine when the defense puts on their case coming up here in the coming weeks.
And you could tell the jury had a lot of questions. I mean, even after you left, for Officer Clemens, they had several questions for him about, you know, how does this work? What is the kind of training that you get in kind of mental health? How can you tell? One officer testified that he could tell from somebody's eyes that if somebody was lying or not. And Brad Rosie really went after him on that, saying, so you can look in somebody's eyes and tell. And he kind of, you know, backed off on that. So, I mean, intense stuff.
I am so glad that we are tag teaming because
there's a lot, right?
There's a lot, and it allows, you know, we still have our responsibilities for our newscasts at noon and at 4 and at 5. So it's great that when at times when I'm not in there, you can be in there. At times you can't be in there, I'm in there. A lot of the time we're in there together. So I'm grateful that we are doing this together.
Me too.
Scott, we still expect coming up, again, the jury is going to actually hear Richard Allen's voice because our understanding is there are also some prison confessions from when he makes phone calls home and is talking to his wife and his mother. So we expect the jury is going to be hearing those probably, I would think, tomorrow, if not coming up on Thursday. So the state is getting toward the end of what it said that it was going to present. They said 3 things that they're going to present on their case. Number 1, it's about Bridge Guy. We heard about people who say that Richard Allen is Bridge Guy and saw Bridge Guy out of the scene. About a bullet, or essentially a cartridge. That was found at the crime scene that they linked back to Richard Allen having cycled through his gun, and then these confessions. So we are now on the 3rd leg of this, of this case that the state is presenting to the jury. Really jam-packed day, Scott, and we expect we will have a lot more coming up tomorrow.
For sure.
All right, Bob Siegel, Emily Longnecker, continuing outstanding coverage here for 13 News. Thank you so much, both, and get a good night's sleep, and we'll see you tomorrow. We're going to be breaking down the Delphi murders trial every weeknight at 10 o'clock right here on WTHR+. You can also find our ongoing coverage, including detailed reports of every day of this trial, by going to WTHR.com/Delphi. Thanks for joining us.